Hi there, and welcome to this lecture. In the previous lecture, we explored how we can read and write files in Perl, and that's perfectly fine to use the out-of-the-box approach for trivial tasks to read or write to files. However, you might have noticed that there's a lot of low-level things you need to keep track on in order to take the out-of-the-box solution when it comes to managing files, such as you need to create file handles, remember symbols for writing, reading, and appending to files, closing file handles, and so on. It would be much better if we could delegate these low-level tasks to a module that can do repetitive steps for us. And it turns out there is such a module. Well, several. But we will explore one of the most popular ones called PathTiny. PathTiny gives us an excellent and easy to understand interface to do all the actions we did before. It's light, fast, and in my humble opinion, very user-friendly when it comes to working with files. Now, first things first, in order to use PathTiny module, we want to install it. And as before, we can go to metacpend module repository and look for path::tiny. If we open up the link, as before, we're going to be met with great documentation and it's going to give you many examples to achieve exactly what you're after. Even in the summary, we can already see some examples of how to read and write to files. And not just that, we can also read directories, which is pretty great. So let's start by installing this module. If you copy the name of the module, go back to the terminal and as before, run cpnm, the module name. It's going to take a second or two to get installed, and I'll see you back once this has finished. Now the module has finished installing, and we're ready to use it in our code. And in order to use this module, we can do the same thing we have done before. So we use the use keyword, path::tiny, which is this module's name. And what this module exposes is a method called path. And this path method takes a string, where you provide the file you want to read or write to. In this case, I'm going to provide a file which is called test.txt, and I'm going to use the relative directory. You could use the absolute directory to indicate where you want to read or write the file from, but in my scenario, I want to work with a file which is relative from where I'm running the script, which is currently Perl_course folder and next to the script.pl file. Now what this path method returns is an instance of a class that is going to have various methods that is going to allow us to read and write files. So what we can do, we can say my path and assign the return value to this path variable. And if you don't know from where this path function is coming from, I do encourage you to check the video where we talk about the difference between require and use keywords and how some methods are automatically imported by modules. Now, returning back to our example, what we could do now, we could do path and call a method spew. If you go back to the documentation, we're going to see that in order to write files, we can call the spew method that takes a list of data we want to write. In this example, we could provide a very simple list. For example, 3 strings that says A, B, and C. If we save this file, run it. Oops, looks like we have syntax error, and yes, seems like we're missing semicolon at the end of this statement. So if we add a semicolon, rerun the file, we're going to see that there's a new file that appeared next to our script file, which is called test.txt. And it contains 3 things. It contains A, B, C. Now here you can see that we actually wrote separate lines, and you would be expecting that it's going to write the lines line by line in the file, but this is not the case. You do need to provide the separator explicitly. For example, if I replace these single quote characters with double quote characters, and if we save this, and also let's add a new line at the end of each character, rerun the file, and let's see what's in the test file now. We're going to have A, B, and C on new lines. So do keep in mind that you do need to provide new line separator when you want to write your data on separate lines. Now, alternatively, if we wanted to read a file, what we could do, we can use a method called slurp. And how we do that is by declaring a new variable where we're going to store the content of the file, and I'm going to call it a content and assign the result of path slurp. Save this, rerun the code. And we probably actually want to print out what's in our content variable. If I print out the content, save the file, and we rerun the script again, we're going to see ABC. And this is the exact content that we have in our file. Now, alternatively, you could also use a method which is called lines. So instead of just reading everything in a scalar context and just having one string, we can use lines that we assign to content, which is an array. And here we can print out through dumper \reference of the content, just to get a better representation of what's in this array. you can just turn it into arrayref. So if you go to the console and rerun the script file, what we're going to see is that we have each line read separately, and it ends with a new line. You could of course do some processing, you could remove the new line, but if you're happy to leave it as it is, then just know the lines do read the file line by line by preserving the end separator of that line. Now you can do other very useful things with this module, and I do encourage you to check the documentation. There's an excellent documentation of each of the methods you can use to achieve things such as modifying the permissions of a file or moving a file from one path to another. This module also allows you to work with directories and list files in directories and so on. By the end of the day, this module pretty much allows you to do anything you would like to do with files, folders, reading, writing files, moving files, modifying permissions, working with different paths, so on and so on. Now this is it for this video. We looked at an alternative of how we can read and write files using a module called PathTiny, instead of using the Perl's out-of-the-box solution to work with files. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you at the next one.